Hey there, welcome to the Dentelligencia podcast. I'm here with Remy Isdaner and Brian Hanks. We are a podcast that helps dental clinics and dentists make the best decisions for their businesses. And so we're here again with Brian. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Nick, Remy. A pleasure.
Yeah.
Our pleasure, Brian.
I guess to really start off, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, what I do is make every decision that a dentist needs to make, what you guys talk about day in and day out, easier by helping the dentists pick the right practice from the jump. Okay, so that's the less fancy way to say that would be is I'm the accountant and consultant for buyers of dental practices. So if you think about what a traditional broker does when they help a dentist sell their practice, I do something similar. I just do it on the buyer side. So I'm a buyer's agent. I'm the CPA helping the buyer buy the right practice for them at the right time, at the right price, and help them understand what it is they're actually buying.
That's really interesting. And we did some background here. And as Nick mentioned, we both are on the, spend our time on the buyer side. And our experience is mostly limited to Michigan, of course. But we, in our experience, there's often a broker involved in these transactions with acquisitions, that is, and they're always representing the selling side. And so is it safe to say what you're providing is unique and less common? And if that's the case, how did you get into working on the buyer side, where really that's who needs the advocacy and the support?
So the quick answer is I think I'm the only firm in the country that solely does buyer rep on dental transitions.
Okay.
I know there are a number of accounting firms out there that kind of dabble in the space, maybe do 2, 3, 4, 5 a year, something like that. There are a couple brokers that will kind of say, well, on this deal, we'll help with the buyer. And then, of course, there are the infamous dual representation brokers out there that say they help both sides, which, of course, is kind of like government intelligence and other just nonsensical phrases. But the short answer, yep, I think I'm the only one in the country that does this solely, and it's a fun place to be. I wouldn't mind if I had 10 competitors out there, because then it would normalize the process of using a buyer's rep. So anybody out there wants to come compete, please do. I'll help you get your business started, and let's make it happen.
Yeah, I think you're probably serious with that invitation too, and I can appreciate that. Yeah. And it's nice to know that it is less common, because that's our experience here.
Yeah.
Nick,
I mean, because by nature we share some affinity as to helping and advocating strongly for our clients. I mean, I certainly will have a lot of questions. I don't want to dive too deep into some of the questions that I had, but for the future. But how did you get into this, and why?
I didn't mean to dodge that part of your question, Nick. Sorry. The quick, I was a certified financial planner working for a couple dental CPA firms. So CFP, helping dentists understand 401k and profit sharing, and what do I do, and should I do a Roth IRA or traditional IRA, and do I make too much money? Right, we're having these types of conversations, which early on in the dentist career mostly consist of how do I pay off these student loans? Those are kind of the financial planning and tax questions most dentists have on the personal finance side. And so Nick was working for a couple dental CPA firms, and inevitably the associate clients who were thinking about making a move into ownership would come to their CPA very reasonably and say, hey, I got a broker in Detroit, or I got a broker in Ann Arbor that's telling me about this practice. I think I want to buy it. Is this a good decision? I've always wanted to live in Battle Creek, but what about, I'm thinking about this area, and Ypsilanti looks nice. They're having conversations with their CPA about the complex process of buying a business. And what I noticed was that very consistently at these CPA firms, they were informed enough to have helpful directional advice, and dangerous because they didn't have enough experience to give detailed numbers, analyses, and advice on transitions. In other words, it would be like me saying, once in Little League, I tried to, hit a couple pitches from the coach. Now I'm going to go play in the major leagues. I'm up against a major league broker who's throwing 98-mile-an-hour fastballs. And I think I remember how to swing a bat. So yeah, no problem. Let me help you. I'll be your hitting coach, and I'll tell you how to hit this fastball. It's nonsense. Sure, the act of swinging the bat is the same, but it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, and wait till they throw the curveball. All
Yeah,
right, we got to
exactly.
use that one. So
there you go.
That's cool. I mean, we both have interesting stories of how we got to where we are, and it's always it feels good when we have a successful a successful transaction. Can you share any awesome stories where your involvement actually made or how your involvement substantially helped your client?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I tell our clients is, please don't come to us thinking that you're going to pay us a fee and we're going to guarantee you a lower purchase price, for example, or we're going to guarantee that you have XYZ success in terms of collections in your first year or two. Ultimately, what we're selling is peace of mind. With that being said, the examples of actual real monetary savings in a deal when you have a buyer's rep involved are numerous and huge. So just in the last month, I'll give you two examples. One would be helping an associate purchase the practice where they currently work. Okay, so two docs working side by side. Associate came in. They had a verbal conversation with their boss prior to starting ownership. And the boss said, yeah, makes sense. I don't think I want you to pay for your own production. So when we get to the point in our relationship where you're going to buy in, I will take into account your production, what you have contributed to the practice, and we will take that into consideration in the price. Well, okay, fast forward 2 years from that conversation. That wasn't in writing, right? Side note, always use a lawyer. Always have this in writing if you can. But in this case, they didn't. And this buyer came to me and said, hey, seller's working with a broker and I don't see this promised discount in here. Can you help me? And my honest answer to that buyer was, listen, I don't know. I actually don't know if I can help you, but let's do a valuation taking into account what you feel like is fair. You'll be able to present that document to the seller and have a rational conversation around the differences in those two prices. Now, in this case, the difference in price was $187,000. Okay. So that's where I get nervous, right? As the buyer's rep, essentially what I'm telling the buyer is, go tell the seller that I told you to rip $178,000 or $187,000 out of their retirement account. That's kind of a tough conversation. Well, kudos to the seller in this case. Seller looked at the numbers, said, you know what? I do remember having that conversation. You're right. I did say that. I can see the math here. You're right. We should go with your price. And again, kudos to the seller. It's a big and honest person that can have that conversation. But that's one example. Another real quick one, Nick, would be we talked to a buyer who was buying a substantial practice, $1.8 million in the purchase price. Okay, so big practice, 7 ops, 2 providers. They're going to keep an associate, and they went to the bank, and they went and they had a conversation with the banker. Banker said, no problem. We'll give you the whole 1.8 million plus we'll give you $150,000 in working capital. So 1.95 or almost $2 million in loans. Buyer came to us, said, hey, Brian, these are the terms from the bank. I'll leave the bank unnamed in this case. I looked at it. I had no joke, 2-minute conversation with that buyer, one more 2-minute conversation with a new banker and the current banker. And the 5.7% rate magically came down to 4.89% with 2 phone calls. And that was over the life of that loan. That was a $230,000 savings in interest over the life of that loan. So those are the types of things that we're doing as a buyer's rep. Now, I give you some dollar examples because they're impactful, they're big, these are meaningful numbers. But I tell people, I caution them, hey, listen, don't come to us thinking we're going to guarantee you $187,000 off your purchase price, because that doesn't always happen. But those are a couple examples if that helps.
No, we understand that peace of mind is it's a really important part of the process and the service that we provide, right? And so are we saving our clients time and money, really on every project? Yes. Sometimes more, sometimes less. And sometimes, there isn't a lot of monetary benefit because the deal on the table when we arrived was already really good. And in that case, being able to provide that peace of mind that our client's getting the best possible deal
Yeah,
in the market right now, it's important. And a lot of it is just managing expectations and the perspective, right? So that these deals get done.
totally agree. Can
Yeah,
I go
yeah.
ahead, Nick? Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, inside of those types, I mean, it's a little bit different. A lot of the situations, there's purchases and there's leases, and the leases, there's just a lot of details. Sometimes you're looking at a 60-page lease, and so it's like, what are the big ticket items that you need to, at least, whether we're going to be able to make headway on, you still need to understand them and understand what those implications are, so that you can, you can sleep at night.
And
So.
what is that sleep at night worth, right? Remy, you're saying peace of mind, and Nick, I'll tell you, peace of mind for me actually it was 2 weeks ago, was $380. Like, again, I'll maybe turn in my man card. And these days, I don't know if man card's a real thing. We should all probably turn in our man cards, but I have been messing with the sprinklers in my yard for like 3 years, trying to get them, to not water the sidewalk, but also actually water the grass. No
Sure.
joke, guys. 3 years. Like, how hard can it be? Like, I have screwdrivers. I know, like, I'm a reasonably intelligent person, and there are brown spots in my lawn every year. I paid a guy, Alejandro, $380. He had it fixed. I'm like embarrassed. 38 minutes, like $380. I remember that just because it was divisible by 10. And
He's
I
a
remember 38
specialist.
minutes. He had it done. The grass looks amazing now. And I'm like thinking about the 3 years of time that I wasted messing with this. So how much is your peace of mind worth? And is it smart to just outsource this to a specialist? Now, I'm biased on a transition. I say yes, but of course I would say that because I get paid. And whatever it is, if it's consulting on a website, or you have somebody else do your taxes, or having a financial planner tell you when you can retire, I think getting a good, honest, ethical specialist involved is absolutely worth your time in most cases.
What are the red flags, or the biggest
Mm-hmm.
the biggest pitfalls that you see, or that dentists should look out for when they're trying to evaluate a practice? Or where are the biggest places where things can kind of go awry within the process?
Yeah. There's two, and the first red flag or big pitfall happens before they even find that first practice. And that is, I've found that most buyers assume that when they're looking for a practice, there will be one that's available in the area that they're kind of looking. And I'll tell you why that's a mistake. Not that that's not true, by the way. I think the mistake that a lot of dentists make here, the pitfall that they keep falling into, is they are a little bit blind to the fact that most dentists have been on a very well-defined career treadmill that started in undergrad with the bio or the microbiology degree, and then they took the DAT and they did dental school. Maybe they did a GPA or AGD, and that was like their first big decision and specialize. And then they went and got an associate job. And now they know that the next step is to buy a practice. They're interested in ownership. So they look around and they say, okay, Remy, I'm ready. Where's it at? Where's my application? I'm ready for my 7-op, 2 million collecting practice that's in, next door to me. And we go, well, it's not on a website is the quick answer. So Nick, the answer to your question is, first big pitfall is most dentists, associate dentists, have a very poor personal network of other dentists, preferably those with some gray hair on their heads, who might know someone that's selling their practice, or they themselves might be selling their practice. So first big pitfall is to not have a good personal network to fall back on when you're ready to make that purchase decision. I've got a second pitfall, but that makes sense. Anything I can clarify with that?
No, that cool. Resonates. So we understand.
Yeah. Okay. So second big pitfall, I would say, is doing the very reasonable assumption that I can buy a cheap practice with an accompanying smaller loan and build it up to the practice that I ultimately want, rather than just buying the more expensive practice that's already doing the amount of dentistry, the type of work, the number of operatories that you want to be doing. So I understand the psychology. If I had, what is the average now, guys? Like $380,000 on average in student loan debt for dentists, and for some, it's substantially more. If
I'd
I
say
were
if it
paying off
wasn't,
those,
yeah,
I
yeah.
paid off six figures of student loan debt too, but it wasn't quite that much. And if someone told me that my smartest move was to go into more debt, I'd be like, what is this guy smoking? And I get it. But what people forget, the pitfall is that when you buy the cheapo practice and assume you're going to build it up, what you're essentially saying is, I am smarter and more hardworking and just generally a better dentist than the person I'm buying the practice from, which could be true. But I don't know how many dentists you guys have met that are actually just slackers and are, terrible people and don't have a good work ethic. I mean, you just don't generally get into dental school and be so. If you genuinely think you're smarter and harder working than the average dentist out there, then by all means, buy a dinky little practice and try to build it and grow it up. But most dentists are going to be better off buying a more expensive practice within reason, that's actually doing the type of income and take home pay that they want to be doing right from the jump, rather than trying to build one up.
Now that second example, makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me of the scenario we often wrestle with our clients on a project, which is ultimately justifying the premiums for better opportunity, despite how scary it is. To your point of taking on more debt on top of what you already have.
Yeah.
It's probably it's among the scariest parts of any project that we work on. But getting, whether in some cases there are tangible reasons that we have to explain as to why it's important to spend this extra money, and a lot of it's the intangibles. Being able to attract and retain talent,
Yeah.
is a big one. The fact that you spend the amount of time that you spend in your practice, your staff, and so forth. More time you spend at home. And it's important to make sure that it's nice, that it's comfortable and easy to spend time in, and that takes money.
Whew. Yeah, I tell a lot of clients, they'll come to me and they'll say, in a moment of candor, and I give them major credit for saying it out loud. They'll say, Brian, I'm kind of feeling nervous to borrow $800,000 to buy this practice. And I have two responses. My first response is good, right? Good for you, right? If you're not a little nervous borrowing almost $1 million, I don't, you've got bigger, you're more steely eyed than I am. And so good for you that makes you nervous, because it should. But my second response is, paradoxical as it sounds, the quickest way to get out from underneath debt is to make a lot of money. And the way to make a lot of money in dentistry is to have a big practice, like a high producing, high collecting practice that's profitable. So go get a high producing, high collecting practice that's profitable, which, by the way, is going to be a little more expensive, but you're going to be able to pay off that debt a lot faster in the short and long run.
So speaking of profitability, what are the major financial metrics that dentists should be looking at when they're looking at a practice?
Great question, Nick. So first and most telling number is just simply collections. Okay. Good rule of thumb for me is 800,000 plus in collections. Generally, and I prefer $1 million, but I'll take 800,000 or more. It tells me a little bit about the neighborhood, the reputation of the practice, the staff, and how well trained they are. Number of active patients, things like that. So the collections number itself tells me quite a bit about the practice itself. Okay. Next number that I'm going to look at is tricky for dentists to get on their own. So go talk to a specialist like Nick, Remy, or myself to find out the actual profitability of the practice. Okay. Actual average profitability in the US for all dental practices nationwide, all specialties, is 38.3%, or put differently, the average overhead is 61.7%. So you want the profitability of your practice to be around that number. In other words, if a practice collects $1, you want, as the owner, you want to take home about 40 cents on the dollar, give or take. Okay. So that's the next product. And since that one's hard to get without some actual help, I tell dentists, use as a proxy then staff costs, lab fees, and dental supplies as a percentage of collections. Okay. And that they usually can figure out. Staff costs are wages, payroll taxes, any benefits like 401k, things like that. Not the doctor's salary. Doctor's salary gets kept separately, but hygienists, front desk, assistants, their salary plus payroll taxes, I want that to be no more than 32% of collections. Okay? If it's 33, no problem. 35, and I start wondering, how well the practice is managed. 40% and above, I think to myself, oh my gosh, a buyer's going to have to fire someone or drastically cut salaries, which never works. And then lab fees and dental supplies. Again, I'm using GP practices here as a proxy. So you specialists out there, you're going to be a little bit different on some of the numbers here. But GP practice, 5 to 7% is kind of world-class and ideal. I'll take 8% in either of those categories. 8% for lab fees as a percentage of collections and 8% for dental supplies as a percentage of collections. 10 and above in one or more of those categories. And somebody's got the credit card, an assistant's got the credit card, and the Shine rep is really happy to go visit that practice. So
sure.
Those are a couple proxy numbers. Does that help?
Sure. Yeah.
I hope that's certainly helpful for anybody watching, and it's helpful for us to have a some frame of reference on how to, not that we would attempt to fully navigate this type of conversation. We know who to point, direct our doctors to, but it's helpful for us to understand that too. Sure.
Good. Yeah, perfect. Great questions.
How do you quantify culture? I'm sure part of when you're trying to evaluate a practice, that seems like one of those more nebulous types of or abstract concepts, but it'd be interesting to see how you kind of create a matrix, decision-making matrix with your clients around that.
Okay. I've got 3 answers. The first is my most accurate, and it's also the hardest to get, unless you're an associate in the practice currently. Okay, so my all-time favorite way to buy a dental practice, by the way, is to work in the practice first if possible. Hopefully not for years and years and years. Something like 6 to 12 months would be ideal. But if you're an associate in the office, my first answer to that is, Nick, well, you're looking around, right? You talk to the people, who's happy, who's not, what is the culture. And this is why, and if you're an outside buyer, you're coming in and looking at a practice cold, you would try to meet the staff ideally before you submit an offer, or for sure before you buy the practice. And typically, if there's a broker involved, they won't allow that. They'll just say no. Now, I have my problems with the ethics of that no, but let's just set those aside for a minute and let's leave that conversation for, a little later if we want, or a different call. So then I've got 2 data metrics that tend to be the most helpful, and there are others, okay? But the 2 that I hear that dentists can both get and that give them useful information are, number 1, Google reviews, okay? Google reviews are never 100% accurate, but if there are more than 10 of them, they're actually pretty directionally helpful, okay? So I prefer to see 100 plus Google reviews. Most, 65 plus year old dentists don't have that many, but you can start to see online a quick search, Facebook, Google. There's like a couple other websites where sometimes dentists get reviewed. Just both look at the number of stars. Are we talking 4.7 stars or more? Or are we talking like, oh, there's 3.5? And what do people actually write and say? Are they writing about the doctor? Are they writing about the hygienist? And it's consistently, oh my gosh, Mary, the hygienist, she's amazing. Mary, okay, now I know the culture of, and maybe what it is I'm actually buying. And you're also going to look for things like, appointments on time. They used plain English when I was in the chair. I had no idea, why they recommended 4 crowns, that kind of thing. So Google reviews and online reviews, very, very helpful. Second data point that you can almost always get is average length of employment of the staff. Yeah. And very simple. If the staff like working there, the culture tends to be better than not. Okay. Now I think, and I'm of the opinion that can actually go too far, right? You can have, and I have had buyers buy practices where every single employee has been there for 25 plus years. Buyer's going to step into a culture that is going to be pretty tricky to change. That's one extreme, but the other extreme is more common. And that is you have like 1 employee or 2 employees that have been there for 8 to 10 years. and then everybody else turns over every year. And guess what that tells me about the culture is those two employees are toxic. They own the doctor, the current seller, and everybody else that comes into work can only stand those one or two people for about 12 months before they leave and go somewhere else. And that tells me about the culture. But so a healthy culture would be, you've got one or two new people, you've got some midterm people that have been there 5 to 10 years, and then you've got 1 to 3 people that have been there 10 plus years. That's generally a pretty good culture.
That's really great info.
Yeah, the second point is, as I thought about it and ask you out loud, it seems obvious, but is a part of your process to investigate, the social media, the online platforms? I know my wife's in hiring and in human resources, and I understand that hiring managers now have standard operating procedures to investigate social media, which is fascinating.
Totally.
Is that all it is? Is that a part of the process?
100% yes. So when a new client comes on board, we have kind of 3 buckets of work. The first bucket of work is to just analyze the practice.
Yeah.
The form that takes is that's a 35-page report on the practice with very little fluff in those 35 pages. And I think we have 2 full pages of that report dedicated to the online presence of that office. Because these days, Remy, I would say that online presence is at least 2 to 3 times more important than the physical location of that dental office. Street visibility, signage, all those things. That's important. And I want my dental practice to look like an office when I drive by and for it to look professional. But most people, before they even see an office, unless it's on a main street somewhere, they're going online, they're checking the online presence, the online visibility of that office first. So absolutely. And to your point, Remy, this has only happened like 3 or 4 times in the 1,000 plus that I've done this, but I do it every time. A very quick Google search on the seller's name. 3 or 4 times I have found, some outstanding fraud investigation with the state agency around some billing practice, or, dental license suspended 3 years ago type of stuff. So I'll call the buyer and be like, hey, Dr. Smith has some kind of outstanding something or the state of Oregon. What did they say about this? And the buyer's like, what do you mean?
They didn't. They didn't. Yeah.
So, a quick Google search and then, of course, social media and all of that just to see. Yes.
So what when people hire us, we help them really try to make sense of a lot of noise. We help them gather a lot of data so that they can make sense of it and ultimately make the best decisions for their business, whether it's buying or buying a property or leasing. And we want to give them options so that they can choose, because, and we hit on this quite a bit, that this is a really expensive undertaking. These people likely have a lot of debt, and they're probably going to be taking significantly more, and they need that they need that peace of mind. Is there any if you could wave a magic wand and kind of give your client any just any information or some specific information that could be helpful, what would you say?
In terms of documents like I'm asking for, or information I'm giving the client?
How do you take, because there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of competing, you're likely, before you sign somebody up, they're hearing stuff from their buddies from school who have this experience or that experience. And how do you kind of cut through that and kind of and basically, for us, we have to really, it is really imposing, and there's all these different paths you could go down, but we try to do a really good job of kind of helping them understand what to expect at every step. And I think it really ultimately it helps give them some sort of comfort and understanding, where we are at whatever stage in the process. But this is one of the biggest ones, because I think we kind of compete with younger dentists in a different, because I would say that most of the younger dentists that we speak to, they probably want to buy a practice, but a lot of times we'll end up doing a startup with them because they can't find what they want where they want it. But that, that's, we don't need to talk about how we're, But
Oh, that's good.
I'm more interested about how you kind of get, how you create the right message to them, and give them the information so that they know that, all of their options are, or all the important parts are kind of taken care of.
Kind of hear you asking like a two-part question. Part one is like, how do you know who to listen to? And then once you've determined who to listen to, at least for us, like dental buyer advocates, how do we present the information in a way that makes sense to that client
Yeah.
that's asking the questions? Are those the essential elements of that question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, how do you know who to listen to? I'll be honest. Very first thought I had was to remind people not to discount their gut, and I think that comes in the form of I think you just connect with some people, whether it's you like their stuff online, you watch some videos, you read some articles, you've talked with them or something. And I think it can go both ways. Some people just kind of rub you the wrong way. There's something a little off about their presentation. You can't necessarily put your finger on why. And so I would just remind people to pay attention to that gut feeling. And I hope that when people are listening to my stuff, they're not going, oh, this guy's full of crap. And, so I hope your gut is telling you that, I'm somebody trustworthy to listen to, but I'm wide open to the fact that I may not be the right fit for everybody. So I would say listen to your gut. Then my second thought around who to listen to, Nick, is, get data points, but ask, how much experience the person that's giving you a data point has with whatever question it is. So, for example, I actually really do enjoy, and I get a lot of value from these big online dental Facebook groups where there's like 30,000, 40,000 dentists. Somebody asks a question and you get you get 20 different comments. And the 20 different comments are, I think they're decent data points usually, but you have to remember most of those comments are from people that have done it one time in their own practice, or they haven't even done it. They just talked with one of their friends that did it once too. And so I would kind of default to, like earlier in the conversation, next time I have a sprinkler issue, I'm just going to call somebody. I'm going to call a specialist. If I got a plumbing problem, I'm calling a plumber. If I need to know, whether to buy or lease a space, call Nick and Remy. Like they've done this 1,000 times. Same with me. But I'll pause there and I can talk about how to present the info, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would say that it's, well, I don't even know where to begin. Ultimately our job, we're consultants. And we really appreciate the opportunity to serve our clients and give them the best information. And you're right. I mean, it isn't always the best fit. Sure. Sometimes, there are other, there's all kinds of stuff out there. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is really, if we can, we may not work with everybody, but if they ask us a question, we're going to do our best to answer it the best we know how, and
Right.
and give them the best, and give them the best tools. If we can leave everybody at one step, in a better situation, we're happy. We're just out here to kind of, help people's lives, help, because of our role as a consultant, but also to, also to build relationships. So.
I like, one question you could ask yourself in terms of, is this person trustworthy, or can I, is it a good idea to hire them or work with them, would be to ask yourself the question, could I explain let's say I'm looking to hire Nick. Okay, Nick, I'll pick on you for example. I go to Nick with a question and Nick gives me an answer. All right, Nick, maybe it's in a report or we had a phone conversation or whatever. One question I would recommend people ask is, can I turn around and explain what Nick is advising me to do to a spouse, a parent, one of my kids in plain English in a way that makes sense to the person that wasn't actually listening to Nick, right? So, for example, this is what it looks like in my world. A broker will send, a 40-page valuation document on a practice. Then I ask the dentist, the buyer that's coming to me, hey, how much of this do you understand? And the buyer's like, like I see some numbers. I don't know. Like they're using terms I don't get. I'm not really sure. They're saying the practice is worth X, but I don't know how they got there. And, that was kind of my mission when I created my 30-page document was I want somebody to be able to take the page, hand it to their 12-year-old kid, and their 12-year-old kid to be able to understand what's happening on the page. Maybe not explain every nuance, maybe not understand the differences between production and collections, but be able to understand the basics of what's happening there. That could be a decent way to decide if somebody's trustworthy or if there's somebody that's worth looking at, working with, by the way, which is what patients are doing with their dentists, right? The dentist explained to me that I have this thing under my crown. The minute the dentist used the word caries, your average patient's I don't know what that means. What is caries? Like, you mean carry my milk to the car? Like, what are we talking about, caries? So can you explain it to another person? That's a decent proxy I found.
We both in both of our lines of work, we have this idea. We work through a 2-phase deal, right? Where the first phase is that we have to earn quick trust with our client, and then once we have that, and that's not always easy, then we have to actually go and transact. We actually go and buy a practice. We have to go and get through the lease or purchase process, and so that the first phase is it's really important, and you don't have a lot of time to accomplish that. And naturally, when you ask somebody for their business, there's going to be an inherent reluctance or question of what does this person stand to gain from my business, and that's really what we're having to quickly demonstrate, our value and to gain that trust. And once you have that, it makes this much easier. It makes our job much easier to do.
Totally. I tell people, and this is tricky in your guys' world, you guys have the sole exception of this because real estate is tricky. It's getting clearer with some of the recent court decisions and things. But I tell people, hey, you can generally know if someone is on your team if you are paying them directly.
Right.
Which is the problem with a broker, a dual rep broker, sometimes insurance people, et cetera. But like real estate is kind of weird where you guys have the seller commission and which one's paying the buyer and some of those things. So sometimes in the real estate world, you as the buyer aren't necessarily cutting the check yet. Remy is still working for me and has my best interest at heart. So, but anyway, that's a question I sometimes will ask like a consultant or someone, well, who's actually getting paid here and how are you getting paid?
That's right. And look, you're as you said, you might be the only business in the country that's doing what you do on the buyer side.
Right.
And while we have, our competition exists, it's few and far between, although there are other real estate brokers running around doing dental projects in our market, no doubt. But, the idea, you're not necessarily coming up against that. But, if you're not, I think the message of if you're not working with us, that's okay. But work with somebody. You need an advocate. You need somebody that you trust. You deserve to work with somebody that you trust is going to do the best job for you. And the moment that you lose that, someone is going to go find somebody else. But don't do this on your own. And definitely don't work with the person that's representing
the other side.
Remy, do I hear you saying that the very worst thing a dentist could do would be to hop on a dental Facebook group and say, does anyone have a sample legal contract for XYZ thing? Or who can give me a 30, a quick lease that I can fill in some blanks on?
Well, that doesn't really happen, and unfortunately for them, the landlord's lease is generally pretty onerous in favor of the landlord. But that's another story for another day. We're kind of getting towards the end of the time, and really, this is about ultimately. I would think that all the dentists who may be paying attention, their goal really is to serve their patients. And so what tips can you provide to them about how they can maintain good patient satisfaction in a transition?
Okay. Yeah. It's a couple things. First is make sure the letter that goes out to the patients, first of all, write a letter to patients, let them know about the change in ownership and make it upbeat and positive. Okay, this is good news. We're bringing in a new dentist. We have more resources for you. And third, fourth, fifth paragraph down, by the way, Dr. Hanks, oh gosh, that'd be anyway. he's moving on soon in his career, and we wish him the best as he transitions out. This isn't it's come to this sad day when I must announce my retire. Like, oh my gosh, like the patients love you, and they really won't miss you that much. So number one, make the letter nice and upbeat, and then okay, 3 things: start your appointments on time, make sure your front desk actually answers the phone during working hours, and just use plain English when the patient is sitting in your chair. You do those 3 things, and you're immediately in the top 10% of dental practices nationwide. Period. End of story. Now, it's hard to do those three things: start appointments on time, answer the phone when it rings, and use plain English. That's why not every practice is doing it. But you do those 3 things, and you are golden. You will keep 99.9% of the patients. And actually, on balance, Nick, my average client adds net patients in their first year of ownership because they tend to be better at those things than the sellers. So that's the advice I'd have on patient attrition. Don't worry too much. You'll be fine. Yeah.
Remy, you got anything?
Yeah, it's always my favorite question. If your parents, your children, if you have siblings, if you ask them what you do for a living, what would they say? Would they have any idea, and what might they say?
Yeah. My kids do know. They get to help me out occasionally with business projects and things. Let me think about a sibling for a second. Yes, a sibling would tell people I help people buy dental practices. And then they would be immediately confused as to who pays me and why, and they don't know those details.
It's fair enough.
I don't talk about the money side as much, but yeah, I think in general they know, and they know I'm kind of unique out there, and they're like, "Didn't you write some books or do some podcast or something?" So, yeah.
What was the best?
What your book is called?
Oh, so I'm an accountant, which screams creativity, right? So I had a very creative title called "How to Buy a Dental Practice."
We'll have to buy it.
Well, it's free of charge. You guys let me know. I'm happy to leave a link. It's $20 on Amazon. If people want it for half price, I can shoot you guys a link that people are, no strings attached. Happy to just send you an author copy for half the price if that's of interest. I'll make sure you guys get that link.
Cool.
That's great. We appreciate that.
Cool.
Before we let you go, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Okay, that's a good question. Best advice I've ever received was, it's not as hard as you think it looks. Okay. So I've looked at people who've written before I wrote one. And by the way, my book isn't that good. It's okay. Anyway, on the topic of buying a dental practice, it is far and away the best. And it's still going to put you to sleep. Okay. So I don't want people to think I have a big head here, but I watched people write books and I thought, oh my gosh, I could never do that. And actually I can, and I did. Same with a good podcast. I like to think of my podcast, it's called Practice Purchased. I thought, wow, how do people do that really well? And it turns out there are some things you can learn and you can do it. Same with a dentist. Like if a dentist sees somebody that does, full mouth restorations that are just beautiful, or have patient conversations that make sense and that make the patient actually like coming to the dentist. And these dentists are watching, they're going, how do they do that? You can do it too. Like everything can be broken down into a learnable step. Not everybody's 6'7" and can play basketball like Michael Jordan. So let's set aside those exceptions for a minute. But 99.9% of anything you watch somebody do is totally repeatable and can be done. So
awesome.
You can do
one
it.
Last thing. I know you got to go.
Yep.
We're interviewing lots of vendors inside the dental framework. And so that could be contractors, real estate attorneys, all, the whole gamut. If you could ask anybody in any of that space a special question or a question, so when we have a future guest from you, what would you ask?
Okay, let me think. Okay, here's my question. When you walk through the doors of a dental practice, or you do the online version of walking through the doors, what is the number one thing, that data point that you see that tells you whether or not a practice is well run or not?
That's a good one. We'll have to. I think we can. There's a number of different vendors who may provide a multitude of different answers, but we'll ask it and we'll let you know how it went. It was really awesome that you joined us here, and we really appreciate your time and excited to have had you.
Thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure to be a guest. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. Take care.